This is Brian V at Why We Work, and I have the great pleasure of meeting and talking with Matthew Myro. Good day, young man.
Hi there, sir. How are you?
I'm doing wonderfully well. Matthew, thank you for coming. And again, I have this urge to mention it that we met through LinkedIn.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
And
true.
this is like the third or fourth person that I've met through LinkedIn. And I find I should just mention, like, it's a great resource for people in work trying to find some things. And we're going to get you to talk about some of the things you're doing. But that's how we met. And I find it very interesting how people with business interests or things to do with work can come together in this rather than other forms of social media. And I find it quite helpful. So, Matthew, can you give us a little beginning of Matthew when you were younger and how you first started um, in your journey of work?
When I was younger, let's see.
Yeah,
Well,
your first job, your like very
yeah,
first job, like the paper route or the, what have you.
yeah. Well, I'll back up before my first actual paying job. My father always had projects and always wanted to include me in his projects. So we'd be building a fence or building a deck or refinishing a basement or digging a hole to pour an extra slab of driveway or things like that. And so I was always his helper, and so I was always interested in that.
Was he
And
just a handyman or did he have a business as well?
he had a business. He's actually a coder. He's been writing software since the early '80s, and so he's
So
just
with
a
those types
handyman.
of, yeah, those were just handyman jobs, not his business per se.
Correct, correct. Yeah. So before that, he owned a fur and suede cleaning company. And
Okay.
so he had to do everything. If something broke, he was fixing the machines. If the delivery truck broke, he was fixing the truck. He learned the hard way how to do everything, basically, from plumbing to electrical to machining to carpentry, whatever it was. So that was kind of the environment I was raised in.
Yeah.
And so my first job when I was 14, I got hired at a hardware store. So it was kind of fitting. I kind of knew
Yeah,
my way around the place.
very much so. Did he help you get that job or was this your own motivation to go out and seek some employment for yourself?
No, it was the stepfather of a friend of mine who was looking for work, and it was
Mhm.
the local hardware store. And so, yeah, I went in and said, "Hey, I'd like a job."
Why did you get that first job?
It, I had some extra cash. It was
Yeah.
really nice, to be a kid and be able to go to the movies, take my girlfriend out to dinner or something like that. And even though I had to get dropped off by my parents, it was still really nice to just have that kind of freedom.
That's kind of cute though.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of cute.
What are some jobs that you had since then, like into middle school, high school?
Oh man. Well, I always kind of had a job. I had a job at it was a wildlife store where we sold bird feeders and bird feed and kids wildlife games, things like that. I did door to door sales for replacement windows. That one was horrible.
I was just going to say,
Terrible.
how difficult would that be? I was talking and I know
Oh
about people
man.
selling, say, vacuum cleaners or something, but window replacements.
Window replacements.
How
Yeah.
would how would you go about doing that? Like, I mean, I can think in my head how, you're going to get clients, but how did you do that?
Yeah, well, you knock on the door, say, "Hey, how you doing?" I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, so the winters were rough. And say, "Hey, what's your heating bill like in the wintertime?"
Yeah.
Well, with this window, we can reduce it by blah 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 percent, and you'll save this much. When how old are your windows? How old is this house? Slam.
Did you, I mean, because at first I thought you would walk around people's houses and say they need new windows. Hey, was there that element to it as well, or just anyone
No,
you could go
it
to?
was the boss. We had a team of like two or three guys, and our boss would drop us off in a neighborhood and say knock on every single door, and the whole point was just to set up an appointment for the boss to get in there and sell them.
How
So
many, what was the percentage on yeses versus nos?
I mean, barely above zero. I think we might have had two or three
It's
yeses.
tough, eh? It's a
It
tough
is
gig.
really tough,
How
really
long did
really
you last with
tough.
that?
I lasted a couple months, and
It's
it
tough.
just felt
It's,
like it was soul sucking every single day.
yeah. It's funny though, because there's other people that can do those jobs, right? I was speaking with someone the other day and I mentioned, because what he was selling vacuum cleaners, and I mentioned The Pursuit of Happiness. Did you watch that movie?
I
There's a
think I.
Will Smith selling like the
Oh yeah,
mechanical
yeah, yeah, yeah.
machines, and
Uh
he was
huh.
like a
Uh huh.
single dad and trying to go door to door with his one machine, trying to get just enough to get pay the rent. It is soul sucking.
Yeah.
It's really, really difficult, but it is for some people. What was what was your next adventure after selling windows?
I think from there, I got hired at a tea house, an Arabic tea house,
Okay.
and that was really cool.
Yeah.
That was a good start into some more interesting things. I kind of moved into working at coffee shops for a
Yeah.
while
Yeah.
after that. So yeah, yeah, that was good. That was
Did
through my undergraduate school, college.
what did you do in school? Where did you go to school, or what did you do?
I actually created my own major. I called it the human experience. It was a
Okay.
blend between sociocultural anthropology and the philosophy of religion and cultural arts.
So, okay, so now you're kind of getting more towards what you do now. That's more of closer to the path than selling windows, right?
Much more. Yeah, 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 yeah,
It,
much
maybe
more.
not. I mean, you're opening the window to people's lives. I mean, however you want it.
Yeah, I
It was
mean, you
so
can wax
difficult.
poetic about anything if you want to,
So how did
but
you, what, where did you um, turn in terms of wanting to create your own degree and going down the path that is leading you to where you are now?
yeah, I always had a strong interest in the humanities, in people in general, in art. I grew up playing guitar and studying classical guitar, and I have my father's first cousin is actually a shaman and was touring the country and the world really for the foundation of shamanic studies. And he would have his
Okay.
drum and he would come stay at the house, and I would ask him about what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, I'm traveling to the spirit world to speak to plants to find the right ones to help my clients." I was like, well, "Wait, what?" And so it kind of drove me
Just one
down a
second.
path
Can you
of
repeat that?
curiosity.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you want me to repeat that?
No, no, I mean you're saying to him, wait a
Oh,
second.
yes, yes, yes,
Can you
yes.
repeat that? Just one moment.
Exactly. Exactly. So I was like, oh, okay, what does this mean, a shaman? And so I wanted to study shamanic cultures from around the world and drove me into that path.
So then in your school, what was the sort of program that you created? And what was your end goal by creating that program?
My end goal was to learn as much as I could about the human experience. What was it like from the time, about 2 to 300,000 years of human history? What was that like, and what are some of the more enduring experiences across cultures? Some kind of belief in divine, some kind of religious structure around that belief in divine, and always this pursuit of understanding that every culture that we have record of had some kind of interest in knowing why they're there and what they're doing there. And in that process, they all created art. So the cultural arts, the
Hmm.
philosophy of religion, and the anthropology, they all kind of work together in concert to create this vision of what humans are, think they are, and even what they could be in the future.
So in the end of your degree, did you come up with your own, say, thesis, mission, something that you've settled on as this is what the human experience is? Is there something that you had your nirvana? Is would that be kind of a right word in that instance? Like your
Um,
point of euphoria? What did you realize at the end?
I realized that I had so much more to learn.
Yeah,
That's really what I
well, it's
realized.
humbling. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I did. I went to graduate school for it. I studied philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness in graduate school.
Okay.
So went on to keep learning more and more and more about the human experience. And obviously, in graduate school, it took a much deeper dive. We had a greater breadth of thinkers and philosophers and people that have been doing it, and had a lot more real life experience with actual shamans in South America, with Buddhist teachers in Asia, and then yeah, things like that.
So were you working this whole time, or did you save up money to go to school? How were you paying for yourself?
I was working the whole time
What were
because
you doing?
I was working in coffee shops.
Still in the
So
coffee shop, yeah.
yeah, I worked at a coffee shop and a bookstore, and then for graduate school I moved to San Francisco and got a job in a coffee shop on Haight Street, which was really exciting. Lots of characters and fun people around there. But then while I was in graduate school, I got a job at a medical cannabis nursery,
Okay.
and so then that completely changed the arc of my path and
In what way did
work
that
wise.
change? How did that, because I think that's even leading more to what you're doing now. So
Correct.
how did you step into that, first of all? Or did you have experience with marijuana before you started that? Or, and I don't mean like recreational use, but was this in your studies, did you see this as the next logical step?
Um, I wouldn't say I saw it as the next logical step,
Mm-hmm.
but I saw it as the next really interesting opportunity. And I had certainly an affinity for cannabis. I used it recreationally and really recognized its capacity as a healing plant. I had a lot of stomach issues. I
Yeah.
had irritable bowel disease and found that cannabis was one of the only things that would actually alleviate the sharp pains.
Mm-hmm.
And also for its philosophical and its consciousness effects, I found it to be incredible. It was like a spiritual tool. So as I was studying consciousness and given the opportunity to grow a tool of consciousness, the two seemed to fit really well together.
So what was the job that you started with cannabis? What were you doing?
So
Yeah.
it was a nursery, and what we would do is we would cut clones. So we
Yeah.
would cut branches off of the plants, dip them in a rooting solution, dip them into a growing medium, and let them grow roots. And once they grew roots, we would take a tray of these little baby plants
Yeah.
over to the medical dispensaries, and then the dispensaries would sell those little baby plants to growers throughout the state.
Did you know anything about that before you started?
I did not.
Is it interesting? What do you think about that whole process? Because it's not exactly what you're doing now, but did you enjoy that time?
I loved it. Absolutely. I loved it. I loved it. There's something really magical about that process of forcing roots. There's something philosophical about it too. It's like even in the worst conditions, like you just get severed
Yeah.
from whatever it is that you might be a part of, but you can still, if with the right care, with the right attention, you can still grow roots and find a
Hmm.
way to be strong again.
To get
And I really
engraft.
loved
Yeah.
that process. Yeah.
So
And
meanwhile, you're still in school.
correct.
Is this changing some of the philosophy of which you were studying, or is this amplifying what you've already learned?
Um,
Or
I
you're
would
just
say
a job at that point?
I felt like it was experiential in regards to what I was learning, and so studying consciousness and the evolution of consciousness and being able to witness the relationship between the cultivator and the cultivated,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing how we could, beyond just the exhaling of CO2 providing more food for these plants, it seemed like we could pay closer attention to them and they would grow their roots faster. Or if the group of us was in a weird place, maybe some infighting and things like that, that the roots would slow down with how quickly they produced. It was really fascinating to witness that interplay of consciousness between plant consciousness and human consciousness.
What year was this when you first got that job in grafting plants?
It's 2004.
So this is a boom period, is it not? Is that
In
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 San
Calif-
Francisco?
yeah, in
Yeah.
California, it was still not quite a boom yet. It was still
Yeah.
very much ramping up. I would say the boom kind of peaked around 2009.
Yeah. It's yeah, because now it's pretty rampant in North America. Canada, me being from Canada, it's something I've known about for a long time. And it's picking up in the States. I mean, at more of a rapid
Yes.
pace. So
Yeah,
after you
definitely.
graduated, were you
Mhm.
still working in this particular job, or did you do something different?
Still working in this particular job. So I stayed in the medical cannabis space and ended up becoming the general manager of that company and branching off with a few of the employees. And we started our own company kind of as a competition,
Yeah.
um, but did well. we managed to do quite well for
It's a
ourselves.
probably lucrative business, is it not?
It is. It is. It provided for a lot of really beautiful opportunities. That's for sure.
So did that lead into what you're doing now, or did you do something in between?
I did something in between, yeah, and yes, it did lead into what I'm doing now. But I did something in between as
What
well.
did you do in between?
So as I was growing through that, I also I've always had obviously a fascination and a passion for human development and human processes, and so I got really into the personal development side of things, and also fitness coaching and things like that. And so I created a transformational coaching model and started taking on clients, personal clients, one on one with that. So I was doing that for a while, kind of as a transition out of the medical cannabis world, and then actually, consequently, a transition back into the cannabis
Why
world.
did you
But
want to
we'll
get
get to
out?
that.
Why did you want to get out at that point?
The situation in California wasn't um, it wasn't great as far as
Mm-hmm.
I could tell. It was right on the precipice of when they were about to enact the adult use laws that were going to be very damaging for a lot of the medical laws that they already had in
Mm,
place. And
they're
so
conflicting one another.
very much conflicting one another. And so all of a sudden, whereas a patient used to be able to get, let's say, um, a tincture that they were using that had X amount of THC in it, all of a sudden with the adult use laws, that amount was reduced sometimes by 2/3. And so they couldn't get the same medication that they were able to get before under the medical laws, now with the recreational laws. And they all of a sudden they had to spend 2 to 3 times more money in order to be able to get the same amount of medicine. And I really didn't like the way that things were playing out, so I wanted to kind of distance myself from the industry.
So was it becoming too difficult to maintain a business because of the legal ramifications, and it was you didn't want to have to deal with that, or you or something else?
it was it was a little bit of that, but it was more of a moral stand.
Yeah,
Honestly,
you
it
didn't
was
like the
fine.
way they were taking it.
I didn't like it at all. I didn't like it at all, and I was ready for a shift. I had spent close to 15 years in that industry, and so I was really ready for a shift.
How was it 15 years in and then switching to life coach? How difficult was that transition?
Yeah, let's say 14 years. But it actually it wasn't that big of a it wasn't that big of a deal because I had been doing the life coaching
Mm-hmm.
for the last few years in conjunction
Prior
with
to that,
it,
yeah.
so it was able to really smoothly go in.
And what made you decide to jump back into the marijuana business?
Well, oddly enough, my father and
I
my
was in the back of my mind, I was like, how did your coding dad think about this? But then, okay, now, yes, continue.
yeah, so he was approached by a business partner of his in the healthcare industry, in the traditional healthcare industry.
Mm-hmm.
He had created a product with him that helped assist with post acute care. So once somebody gets discharged from a hospital, helping them find the next care facility for whatever it might be that they needed to do. And so he wrote the software for that program. And this gentleman had friends who were, I guess they were dispensary owners, I
Okay.
believe,
Yeah.
in Nevada, and said, "Hey, these are the big issues that we're confronting all the time." And light bulb goes off in his head, and he says, "Hey, we actually built a structure that sounds like it might be similar to what you guys need." So he went back to my dad and said, "Hey, can you write something like this for the medical cannabis industry?" And he was like, "Yeah, I can write anything." So they started putting together a team and looked around the table and realized there's a bunch of 50 and 60 something white guys with zero experience
They
in
have
the
no
cannabis
idea what
industry.
they're doing.
And my dad's like, "Hey, I know a guy." So
Did you ever have a conversation with your dad about that? Like, how did you feel about thinking of me? Like, was that ever like part of
no, it was never. We have an incredible
relationship?
relationship, and so as I always shared with him whenever he'd come to visit me in California, I always shared with him our spaces and
Yeah,
would show him what we're doing and walk him through it. And
that's great.
yeah, it was. He's yeah. I would not say that he was a hippie, but He's enjoyed his fair share of
He
cannabis in
he
his
he
life.
doubt he had friends.
Right.
He had friends.
Right.
So this is you're now full blown into what you're doing now. Is that
Correct. That's
so? What
correct.
is it? What is it you do on a daily basis?
So right now, the majority of my time is spent with the podcast, and so I have my own podcast, the Edge of Cannabis Medicine podcast, and so it is geared towards finding individuals who are innovators in the space around physicians, researchers, clinicians, cultivators that are really advancing the practices, processors, lab testers, anybody who's more on the science and research and medical side of things, and steering more away from the business and industry side because a
Hmm.
lot of that's being covered. I'll probably move into that eventually, but really want to get really the top notch information to people about this.
Why is that? I mean, I can guess, but why are you looking for the industry side? And you'd want to get to the business side because we need to make money, and sometimes that's the easier way to do it. But why would you want to differentiate who you're trying to contact now? What is your main goal in trying to contact these professionals?
Well, when you get to start talking to a CEO, they have, I'm sure that they have altruistic motives as well, being in the medical cannabis space, but they have some ulterior motives as well, where they're trying to make money and they're trying to push their product. So I'd rather speak to a doctor
Hmm.
who's been writing recommendations for patients for the last 10 years and actually spends a lot of time studying the plant and studying the endocannabinoid system so that they have a knowledge of it and want to educate people. And so this is purely about education, this podcast, and not trying to help people sell their products.
So are you where have you reached in terms of countries, other countries besides in the United States? Or have you had
Um,
that opportunity yet?
for the people I've interviewed
Profession, well,
specifically,
interview, well, even what is it you do in your podcast, or what are some of the experiences you had in your podcast? And are you reaching out to countries like Canada, or what other countries do you reach out to?
yes. So
Because
I've,
you're
I've
you're dealing with legal issues too, right? Some countries, people in some countries may know about it, may deal with it, but maybe it's illegal there.
correct. I'm keeping my focus mostly on the United States. I have spoken to a couple Canadians, but the laws are very different there, and the access to research and things like that are all very different. And so it was very interesting to be able to have that kind of alternative perspective on how they're able to get after their research and what hoops they don't have to jump through that we do have to jump through in the States. But I'm really focusing on the United States because that's where our big push is, specifically as part of the company that I'm part of right now.
So you have your bachelor's degree, your master's degree. How much of a learning process has this been for you?
Constant,
Right?
constant.
It seems pretty challenging because
It
you're not,
is.
I mean, because the stereotype is, hey man, you want to buy a bag of weed,
Yeah, that's
right?
the stereotype,
That's
and
the
that's what
stereotype.
we're actively fighting against. This is real medicine. This is an incredibly complex plant that has over 400 chemical constituents, and each one of those has its own specific healing and medical properties. And we're just scratching the surface of what we understand about the plant. And it's also a plant that has 6 to 10,000 years of documented history as a medicinal plant. So it's ancient, it's present, and I get to keep learning and learning and learning. It kind of
So
feeds me.
besides your podcast, what else is it you're doing outside of the podcast? Or are you
Uh,
solely focused on that?
no, I'm not solely focused on that. So organizing different teams within the company right now.
Are you
I'm
still in California or
no, actually, I live in Austin, Texas currently.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that was a part of the move away from the the, the cannabis cultivation. Wanted to like move myself from California altogether.
Settle down in Texas.
Yeah, Texas, little bit different down here.
So you do what? Sorry?
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I'm mostly focused on the marketing side of things for our company, and which obviously the podcast fits under that umbrella quite well. And so, con- keeping the relationships growing, speaking to do new potential customers, and allowing for access to what we're up to. Because it's a digital platform, so it's a little different than what's happening in the industry. A lot of people are trying to buy real estate and grow a lot of weed in that place and things like that, but that's not at all what we're up to. We're about educating and connecting.
What do you see as the most exciting aspect of the thing that you're doing with marijuana? What do you see as this is a pinnacle that you would like to reach, and that would be the most exciting aspect of it?
Yeah, well, the most exciting. So, one thing is steering people away from using the word marijuana at all
Okay.
because it has its roots in deep racism and derogatory nature of the early 20th century, and trying to dissuade people and making it sound evil with using a Mexican word, and that the dirty Mexicans crossing the border with their devil weed corrupting the youth. And that's where the term comes from. So just even that.
I mean, I'm sure. I mean, any Canadian did not know that. I mean, we're from Canada, right? I mean, marijuana or weed or um, a number of things. I don't think that came up. Maybe you guys took all the meaning of it. We just got the word.
Right, it
I'm
just
not.
got slowly matriculated up
Yeah,
north.
it's just we like to give us the bag, right? That's, well, that's interesting because I did not know that's what it meant. I mean, Mary Jane, I guess, is what we defined it as eventually.
Sure. But yeah, but up until the 1920s and 1930s, it was always cannabis. And you could go to the local pharmacy and get a bottle of cannabis oil. And
Hmm.
you could take it for any number of different ailments. And it says right on the bottle, cannabis. And so really trying to go back to that model of where it's traditionally been. And if we call it cannabis, then it doesn't have that same stigma of marijuana. It's like, oh, you're a marijuana user, and it carries all this stigma, but medical cannabis doesn't.
Mm.
So that's one thing that's very exciting for me is a rebranding of this plant so that it's not so focused on just a bunch of people sitting around getting high trying to get a bag of weed, that we can bring about the medical benefits in a more positive and more traditional way.
What's the biggest challenge of rebranding or, you know, or putting it in better light? What
Yeah,
is the bigger challenge?
the bigger challenge is 100 years of prohibition and propaganda. That's the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is folks like you who had no idea
Hmm.
that word was
That
even racist in its nature. So it's the biggest challenge is being able to reach enough people to let them know that these are the changes that are happening, and these are the nature and the history of this planet.
Matthew, what is something, I mean, you're kind of touching on it, but what is something you want people to know about the difficulty that you have in what you do, but you want them to know the other side of the coin? What is something that you would like people to know about your job, the work that you do?
Um, that's an interesting question. Let's see. Um, I would like people to know that an open mind doesn't hurt anything. Closed minds tend to reject things before the opportunity for learning comes into play. And my whole focus is on education and being able to bring as much education to as many people as possible. And so it's a very challenge to educate someone who already thinks they know everything.
That's true. I had different views of it growing up, then I changed my views and I'm back to the views I had when I was younger, which I think is more of an open mind because of the numerous benefits. There's anything in life can be overused, right? Anything can be overused. And as long as, you're acknowledging that too, that for some people it may not be the right path, but for a whole bunch of other people, there's so many benefits for what you're supporting and what you're working in. I think that allows for that conversation to be vibrant, to be fruitful. But yeah, I history shows that it's been here and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And
Right.
I
And I
thought you were
think
going to say some of the bigger difficulties is like the legality of it because it's in the States. It's not widely accepted. Is that true?
It's, well, I mean, we have quorum at this point. There's 34 states and territories that have legalized it in some capacity for medicinal and or adult use. So that's more than two-thirds of the states right now. But another thing, Brian, if you don't mind, I'd
No,
like
go
to
ahead.
say is that so as of right now, we know of roughly 120, some say 113, some people say as many as 30, but different phytocannabinoids within the plant. And these cannabinoids are the, the main chunk of the medicinal constituents of the plant. And as of right now, we know of two, two out of the over 100 that actually have some kind of psychoactive effect. There's the THC and the THCV.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the ones that get all the headlines, and those are the ones that everybody's looking for. But all of the rest of them don't get you high.
Yeah.
They have no psychoactive effects whatsoever. And with the new technologies that they have in breeding and then in cultivation, they're able to create these plants that are very high in these other constituents of phytocannabinoids, whereas they're not going to allow for any kind of euphoric or high or anything like that, and just allow for the medicinal purposes to come through. So
I
that's
think
another
it's
thing too.
amazing, actually. I think there's a lot of things in this earth. I mean, everything that I see in this earth amazes me. Just how
Yeah,
wonderful it was created, it was made, the usefulness of it, and my feeble mind finds great difficulty in using it or using all the things that we have at our disposal. And then for you're saying even now, we don't even know the benefits of it. So
right,
I agree with you that we should be a little bit more open-minded about, not even a little bit more open-minded about the benefits of the things that are in this world before taking one or two points and saying, hey, you can't use this because of that.
right, right, right.
How do you rest, Matthew, from your, you know, even before, how difficult is your day-to-day job in the work that you do? Like how busy are you? How are you on the go? You have podcasts which wouldn't have you on the go, but you have to plan, schedule, and all that. How busy are you in your work, and how difficult is just your day-to-day scheduling of life?
I have a pretty regimented weekly schedule that I hold very tight to, and I schedule in all the things that I need, like scheduled in rest. A very very strong movement, fitness, and meditation practice that I do throughout the day, and I have all those scheduled in. I have all the time specific for work scheduled in,
Does this come
and
from your life coaching aspect, or is this just something you've had since
yeah, for sure, for sure.
handyman by your dad's side?
Yeah, it comes from all the things that I learned and all the things as a coach. So it's always easier to practice what you preach, right? So I didn't want to feel like a charlatan ever. So I became really, really, really disciplined in my own life to make sure that I was helping people from things that I know work.
So you mentioned body movement. What does rest look like for you?
Yeah, well, naps. I put my headphones in for
Yeah.
some binaural beats and my eye shades on and get a after lunch nap for 20 25 minutes every day for sure. Shut everything down at about 8 p.m. Like no electronics, and so I've got the orange shades so that everything starts to calm down a little bit, blocking out light, and just spend my time reading or sitting or hanging out with my fiance. And yeah, so make sure that I build in a lot of rest throughout the day.
Matthew, where could people find you or get in contact with you, whether professionals or otherwise? I'm sure you're open to talking to anyone who would like to talk about what you do, or even if they have something they'd like to talk to you about. How can people find you?
Absolutely, yes. So you can find me at edgeofcannabismedicine.com. That's the podcast show. Also, Matthew Myro, two T's, MATTHEWMYRO.com. That's all my coaching stuff. And yeah, then there's contact in both those places.
Do you do online coaching as well?
I do, well, I do it through Skype at this point
Yep.
or Zoom. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Matthew? Anything else that I haven't asked you that you want to throw out there, or something that comes to your mind? Is there anything else you'd like to mention?
No, I think that this is really cool that you gave me the platform to share all this,
Oh, it's
and
great. I'd like to.
work is many things,
It is
and
certainly. No,
it's not always just what you do for a job and to make money. It can be many things. So
no, you
yeah,
proved that very well here. In closing, Matthew, why do you work?
I work for fulfillment. I work because it feels good to accomplish things. There's something that you can't get from any other experience besides closure and accomplishment. And work is a really great means to that accomplishment end.
Perfect, Matthew. That's a great answer. And tell your dad he's doing a pretty good job.
I sure will.
Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you soon. I'll message you when all of this is done and through, and talk to you later.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot,
Thank,
Brian.
thank you, Matthew. Bye.
Bye bye.